My name's Ted Murphy. I live in Falmouth Heights. But most people on Cape Cod know me as T M Murphy because I am a writer of kids' books. My first book was The Secrets of Belltown. I wrote this a very long time ago. I believe it was the summer of '95. I had just gotten out of Boston College, and my parents said, "What's your dream, Ted? What do you want to do in life?" And I took a deep breath and I said, "I think I want to be a writer." And they took a deeper breath because they just spent all that money for me to go to BC. And they said, "You know, it's very hard to be a writer." I said, "Yeah, I know, but it's my dream." And I remember my father saying, "You know what? If it's your dream, go for it." And my mom was completely supportive as well. And I said, "Well, that's great." And they said, "Well, what are you going to write?" And I said, "I have no idea." And both my parents were teachers. So my father was the one who said, "Well, you know, when you were a kid, you were a reluctant reader. And what got you reading? What was it, Ted?" And I said, "The Hardy Boys." And he said, "Yeah. Have you ever thought about, you love mysteries, writing a kid's mystery to get kids writing?" And I thought about that. And then it dawned on me when I went to BC, I took a class called Crime Fiction and Folk Myth. And it was the first time you had to, for me to read stories like by Agatha Christie, Nero Wolfe. And part of the final exam was we had to write our own mystery. And I wrote a mystery that was a kid's mystery because back then in college, you tried to kill two birds with one stone. And what I mean by that was I was taking the mystery class, and then I was working with kids in an after-school program. So instead of coming up with something for the after-school program, I said, I'll write this kid's mystery for the class. When I get it back, I'll read it to the kids in the after-school program. So I thought up this character named Orville Jakes, and you might wonder why I would call him Orville Jakes. I mean, what kind of crazy name is that? Well, in the 6th grade, I had a teacher. She was a very nice woman. Her name was Miss Hurley. And on the first day of school, she asked what our names, what your name is. So reads out the attendance. And she comes to my name. And she doesn't call me Ted or my nickname Murph. She says, "Is Theodore Murphy here?" "Theodore? Where are you, Theodore?" Well, you know where I was? I was like hiding under the desk. I couldn't believe she was calling me Theodore because I hated my full name. And finally I went, I'm over here. "Oh, class, he seems to be a bit shy." Everyone waved to Theodore. "Hello, Theodore." And my buddies were like, "Hey, Theodore." And I said, "Could you not call me that? Could you call me Ted or Murph?" And she said, "Well, it says Theodore right here." And I said, "Well, that's my full name. I don't go by that." And she said, "Why?" I go, "I can't stand that name." And she said, "Oh, no, Theodore, it's a lovely name. I'm going to call you Theodore all year long and ruin your 6th grade." She didn't say that, but that's exactly how I felt. So when I decided to work on a mystery for kids, I didn't want to write a superhero character. I wanted this kid to be like any 6th grader who has insecurities. And so I said, okay, I want to give this kid a really bad name that he doesn't like. And through solving the mysteries, he would feel better about his name and who he is, really. So I said, what's the worst name I can give this poor kid? And I'm watching TV one night, and who comes on but Orville Redenbacher, the popcorn guy, with the bow tie. He's like, "Hi, I'm Orville Redenbacher." I went, "Wow, Orville, that is such a lousy name. It's perfect." And as far as the last name Jakes, which is not spelled Jakes, it's spelled like Jacques, but it's pronounced Jakes, I thought of all the old movies I loved where the detective was Jake something, like Chinatown. So I said, I'm going to call him Orville Jakes, and I'm going to put him into a mystery. And I sat down, and I remember the days I sat down, and I said, I've got this character, and I should backtrack. The character came from that short story I read to the kids. So I said, I'm going to make this into a book now. And because my parents said I could live at home and I could do the whole thing. And so I sat down and I said, okay, I'll make it first person. And I went, my name is Orville Jakes. And I sat there for 2 hours with that one sentence. And my brother knocked on the door, and as you see, this is the writer's shack. Back then it was just the shack. There was no writing. That one sentence was the writing. And he knocked on the door, and I opened it up, and I go, what's going on? He said, hey, I'm going to play some basketball. And he was much younger than me. And I said, okay, yeah. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I think I'm trying to write a book. And he went, yeah, good luck with that, man. And he went and played basketball. And 10 minutes later, I was over at the court playing basketball. And like a bad joke, that happened like 3 days in a row. And my dad finally asked, because my dad was a writer and a teacher, and he said, how's the book going? I said, Dad, I have maybe a paragraph. And I told him what was going on. And he said, can I give you some advice as someone who's published books? And I said, yeah, what's that? He said, you don't sit down and say, I'm writing a book. You go, I'm going to write a few good pages. And slowly it will become a book. And I said, oh, that makes sense. And he said, and one other thing. I go, what's that? He goes, lock the door so you're not playing basketball with your brother. And those two bits of advice really worked, because after about 2 months, I slowly looked at my desk, and I went, oh my gosh, I might be writing one of those things. That's what I kept saying, one of those things. And then I just got so into it, and then I finished it. And I remember the day I finished it, I said, Dad, we got to sell this thing. Let's go. He said, well, now slow down. First, you need an agent. And I figured, yeah, okay, I need an agent. Back then, I figured it was the Yellow Pages back then, really, that I would open up the Yellow Pages, make a phone call, and, some guy named Jerry Maguire would come to my door. No, he said, you're going to have to write some letters. And I said, okay, a couple letters. He said, no, why don't you write 200 letters to 200 different agents, and maybe one will want to represent you. I said, 200 letters? I go, you crazy? He goes, hey, it's your dream, right? I said, yeah. He said, you got to work at it. Because he always told me, you can't just dream it. You have to work at it. And I said, okay. So I wrote 200 letters, I sent them out, and I got basically 200 responses, which was very nice of them, because each day I would go to the mailbox, and my mailman, George, he'd be there with a letter, and he'd say, Murph, don't open it. I think it's another rejection. And I'd say, George, come on, just give it to me. And then I'd open it, and I'd go, thanks a lot, George. And he'd go, calm down, man. I only deliver the mail. And after the 200th letter, I said, I guess that's it. I guess my dream's not coming true. And my dad said, well, what do you mean? You're just going to quit? I said, yeah, no one even wants to read the book. Never mind publish it. He said, I got to ask you something. Did Michael Jordan quit playing basketball when he was in the 9th grade and got cut? I said, well, no, Dad. That's Michael Jordan, one of the greatest of all time. He said, yeah, in the 9th grade, he was just another kid with a dream. And I took that to heart. I said, yeah, you're right. I'm not quitting at this. And as a family, we all started to brainstorm. And it turned out that my dad's friend knew someone who knew someone at a publishing company called Simon & Schuster. And he made a call, they made a call, and they said, have your son come in with his manuscript and pitch it to us. And I remember it was on July 5th, because this place called the Writer's Shack used to be the Party Shack. And on July 4th, the fireworks in Falmouth Heights are big. And all my friends were like, come on, let's party. And I was basically trying to kick them out, because I said, I have the biggest day of my life tomorrow. And they're like, oh man, you're lame. And I'm like, no, you gotta leave. And that day I drove up to Boston, and I remember the guy goes, okay, what's your book about? I go, it's about a kid who hates his name. His name's Orville. He said, okay. And he said, any funny characters? I go, yeah, there's a kid named Joe who eats creamsicles at 6 in the morning and wears the same Star Wars t-shirt all summer long and rides his bike off the beach wall and always gets hurt and never knows why. And he goes, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting. He said, well, now you say it's a murder mystery for kids. And I said, yeah. He said, that's kind of touchy. And I go, I get it. And he goes, what's the murder? I said, well, it's about an elderly woman, and she dies. He said, well, I figured she died. It's a murder mystery. How does she die? And I was so nervous. I went, honestly, I forget. He said, you did write the book, right? I said, yeah. He said, but, he said, you know what? He said, I'm really hungry. Why don't you leave it here? We'll read it. We'll get back to you in like 8 weeks. And I said, okay. And I walked out of there. I felt like I completely blew the whole situation because 8 weeks passed, nothing. 10 weeks, nothing. On the 13th week, my dad knocked on my door and I opened the door. And he had like tears in his eyes. And he said, they're on the phone. I can't believe it. They're on the phone. And I said, who? And, you know, being Irish, I said, who died? And he said, no one died. He said, the publishing company, they're on the phone. They want to buy your book. I said, oh my gosh. So I ran to the phone. I picked it up and I said, hello. And the woman said, hi, this is Dorothy Kohler from Silver Burdette Press, which is a division of Simon & Schuster. And for a second I was excited and then I went, wait a second. I really thought she sounded like my friend. Her name's Andrea, who always, since, you know, early on, played practical jokes on me. And I thought it was the worst one yet. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, I can't believe you're doing this. My dad's over here crying. You know what? I am so sick and tired of you. I'm coming over to your house right now. I'm coming to get you. And the woman said, you're coming to get me? I said, yeah, you heard me. And she said, wait a second. Maybe I have the wrong number or something. Is this T M Murphy? Well, T M Murphy is my pen name. And I never dared tell my friends I was going to have a pen name if I got published. And I realized it was the real thing and all the stupid stuff I said. And I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, I can't believe it. It's the real thing. And he said, I know. What are you doing? Get back on the phone. So I got back on the phone. And I said, hi, T M Murphy here. And she said, well, who was that before? I said, oh, that was my brother. And she said, well, your brother, he's very strange. I said, oh, you don't even know. He's crazy. And she said, well, yeah, he said he's coming to my house to get me. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't lie to you. That was me. And there was a long pause. And then she said, you're coming to my house to get me? And I said, no. I said, I thought you were a friend playing a practical joke. And she said, oh, after a minute, she goes, well, that makes sense. That always happens. I go, oh, really? She said, no, that first time guys being published don't believe it. And she said, not the other part. She goes, we got to look into that. And we just had a good laugh at that. And she said, so we love the book and we want you to write a series. And at that point, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. That's the ultimate dream. And she said, we're going to send you the manuscript back, and wherever there's a pink tab, you'll have to make a change. And I said, fine. She said, well, we already FedExed it to you. You're going to get it tomorrow. And I got it the next day, and there were about 200 pink tabs. And I looked at it and I said, they liked the book? What do they do with books they don't like? It was fix this, change that. And my dad said, you know, Ted, when you wrote it, you really didn't know the age group, which is true, because is it for kids 10 or kids 16? And he said, they just want it to be a better book and probably narrow that age group. And once I took a deep breath and then just kind of looked at each change, I was like, oh, they're absolutely right. So I made the changes and it became more of a 10 to 14 age group. The character's 16, but he doesn't act 16 because kids like to read about older kids. And so the finished copy is this guy, The Secrets of Belltown. And then I just started writing all the other ones, Secrets of Cranberry Beach, The Secrets of Kane's Castle, The Secrets of Pilgrim Pond, The Secrets of Twisted Cross, and The Secrets of Code Z. And that was a nice run that I had with that. And then, like anything, you know, times change, and it eventually went out of print. And then I was really feeling down, and I hung out with my nephew, Ryder, who was 8 at the time. And I said, it was right around Christmas, and it was Cape Cod. And Ryder would always come down during the summer. So in his little 8-year-old mind, he thought, oh, well, winter's no different than summer. And he came down to Cape Cod, and he realized what the winter is here. And he was like, there's nothing going on. What are we going to do? And I said, hey, let's go to the aquarium in Woods Hole. Because I was a bachelor. I figured that was open. Well, that was closed for the season. So I went, let's go over to the seal tank. And then we went over and the seals weren't there. And he's like, Uncle Ted, where are the seals? And it was right around Christmas time. And I said, well, they're working for Santa Claus. And it was on that day that that energy was back. Because I started telling him this story about how these seals were, how they're saving Christmas. And we would go all around town. At the time, there was a place called the British Beer Company, which is now shipwrecked. Great place, by the way. And we went to lunch there, and my friend O'Neill he's a chef there, still a chef there. And he came out of the kitchen and met my nephew, and he said, Teddy, he calls me Teddy, he said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm just telling him a story. And I said, O'Neill, if you weren't a chef, I want to put you in this story. What would you want to be? And he said, I always wanted an ice cream truck. And my nephew goes, that will be perfect in the book. And I'm like, now I'm thinking, oh, I'm writing a book. And I said, yeah, okay, ice cream truck in the winter. And I said, wait a second, an ice cream truck. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, it deals with Christmas. And he went, I love it. So after that whole day of telling the story, I drop Ryder back up in Bristol, Rhode Island, drop him off, and I said, what do you want for Christmas? And he said, I want what we did today. I said, what do you mean? He goes, Uncle Ted, you have to write that book. And I said, that's great. And he goes, it is, because Christmas is only 4 days away, so you have 4 days to do it. I said, Ryder, I can't write it now, but I'll make you a deal. I'm going to write that book, and I'm going to get it published. And I did, and I had a really good illustrator named Adam Taylor do the drawings for this, illustrations, I should say. And this came out, Leapfrog Press put this book out. And it was a nice little run with that. So after I got published, my mom said to me, okay, now it's time for you to give back. I said, what are you talking about? I just got published. She said, nope. You know how you have your little shack there? And the shack, I should explain, is a converted 2-car garage, which was basically a party place in Falmouth Heights for many of my college years. So now she said, you should make that into a writer's shack. I said, what are you even talking about? She said, you should teach kids creative writing. And I thought about it, and at the time I was still working part-time at the Island Queen parking lot, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do the class. And I taught my first class, and that was 28 years ago, and I've been teaching several classes for several ages for the last 28 years. So from the teaching, I decided I want to have some teaching books, and my buddy Mark Penta, who I collaborate with all the time, he said, hey, I've got an idea. And he sent me a drawing of a character. This guy was the first guy. And I looked at him, and he said, you have 40 minutes to come up with a story starter. And I came up with a story starter for Good Guy Gus and Mr. Groucho. And you'll have to read the book to find out what the story starter is. But from that point, we continued to collaborate. We made creative coloring and far out fun. I should say the first one was Super Strange Story Starters. And they're all totally weird activity books. And our latest one is Unusual Objects in Fantastic Places. And that just came out within the last 8 months. But on the side, for several years, I wanted to do my own project that isn't a kids-related project. And I worked on a book called Macabre Trophies. Some people call it Macabre. I call it Macabre. It's the accent. Macabre Trophies, and this just came out this past summer, and it's a thriller set on Cape Cod. It is no kid's book, and the other part of it is, you might notice that my name's Declan Rush. I do have a split personality because the publisher is Seacrow Press. They're right out of Barnstable. Love working with them. And they said to me, we want to publish this, but we might have to do an imprint because a lot of their books are very uplifting. This isn't uplifting. This is terror on Cape Cod. It's one of those beach reads that, or airport reads that, if you like that kind of thing. So they said, we're going to start a imprint called Dark Waters Books, and you're going to headline it. And I said, that's such a great idea, because I'm going to also headline it with not my real name, not T M Murphy, not Ted Murphy. I will go with Declan Rush. And that is because I don't want kids to go to the Cape Cod bookstores. And by the way, if it's not in your Cape Cod bookstore, ask them why. Because you should support local bookstores, but local bookstores should support local writers. So I didn't want the kids to go in and ask for a T M Murphy book. I said, I'll call him Declan Rush. So that's been a lot of fun with my friends and myself. And now they want me to do a sequel to this. And that's what I'm working on. And it's actually right over in the corner here. I'm just going to get up. And it all starts like this, a notebook. And you just write down. So I write down my notes. So that's what I'm working on. I love what I do. It's not easy to be a writer. You're constantly, promoting yourself. It's like running for office. I'm on Facebook all the time doing that kind of thing. So that's kind of the downside of it, because I don't want to be doing that. I just want to be writing. But the greatest gift I got from all of this is the teaching part. Because, as I say, I've been teaching for 28 years. The kids get a nickname. They end up signing all over the place their signatures. And most recently, one of my former students, as we're filming this, Julia Cox, she started with me when she was 10 years old. And her screenplay has just been made into a movie that is streaming on Netflix beginning today. And it's called Naiad. And it stars Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. And I find that hilarious because Julia's mom called me when I was teaching Julia, when I think Julia was about 12 years old. It was around Halloween. And Julia said, hey, what movie do you suggest I should watch? And I suggested Silence of the Lambs, forgetting that she was only 12 years old, but she was so ahead of her time as a storyteller. And her mom called up and she said, really, Dad? Silence of the Lambs? And I said, I'm so sorry. But she said, I get it, because she was ahead of her time. But that's what I loved about having her in class and having all ages. I teach adults as well, is to give them a safe environment to just write it. And that's what the class is called, the Just Write It class, which you can find on Facebook. And if you're into the Declan Rush, declanrush.com for the thriller, and then totallyweird.activitybooks.com. And I do school visits. I go all over New England. So hit me up, and I just want to thank you for learning a little bit about my life and the Writer's Shack.